let me give you the steps that we're going to do. Number one, we're going to create a descriptive summary. How about I spell it right? Descriptive summary. And this is at the observational level, which means that it's not going to be perfect. And then after we do that, we're going to make, we're going to call it today, there's different terms that could be used, but we're going to call it the interpretive summary. Okay, and then we have application summary. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to describe what is going on in this text and just what comes to your mind immediately. So uh, I'll just rewrite it. So descriptive summary. I like to change different colors. So let's say we make the descriptive summary blue. All right. First one. What was from the beginning? What we have heard, what we have seen with our eyes, what we have looked at and touched with our hands concerning the word of life. Okay, so it's using the word what. Other translations would use which or who, things like that. So I'm just going to go with the idea what we are talking about is the word of life that we have interacted with in our human experience, something like that. Now, when we use the word "we," when you're doing descriptive summary, it's focused on the past, and you're trying to describe what's going on. So we have to talk about what this "we" is, and so this the apostolic circle. So we could, if we want, we could just put apostolic circle. In other words, the circle of the apostles, those that are in the apostles. So what the apostolic circle is talking about in the beginning of this book is something called the word of life, which it's capitalized, so we're indicating a person here. And then he's talking about it was from the beginning, what we heard, we have seen with our eyes, and we looked at the word of life. And so I just summarized that by saying we have interacted with in our human experience. Talking about is the word of life. So maybe I could add the word person called the word of life. Perhaps the word phenomenon or something like that could occur. And usually this would be past tense. So uh, what the apostles are talking about is a person called the word of life that they have interacted with in their human experience. So they would take out the we's. Um, so that they have interacted with in their human experience. Um, if we wanted to say a little bit more, we could say this has a specific beginning. Perhaps we could say the author. The author has a specific beginning point for this interaction. And whenever I do this, I'll be doing this on the board. I'll divide up the board into these three parts and get people's participation, and it will do it orally before we write it down and things like that. But this still helps give people an idea what you're doing here when you're making your descriptive summaries. And I'll just add the word descriptive summary so we can see this. And the reason I'm doing this at the the sentence level, and then eventually paragraph and chapter, is is just to build up the skill that's involved or the method and get people used to things before we do observation of a book as a whole. Descriptive summary. All right. So a principle, or I'm using the word interpretive summary. Now we just have barely even touched on this text. So we understand that any interpretation is what's called preliminary and tentative. In other words, it's not going to be a great interpretation. Now, I got pre understanding, and I've been in this passage many times and all of that, but just keep in mind that when you're jumping from observation, or you're describing what the passage is saying, and then you're trying to interpret it and then apply it to somebody, if you do it fast, there's always a risk that you're going to miss something. But in ministry and evangelism, or sharing your faith or discipleship, or if you're in a Sunday school class, you need to be able to read a passage, summarize the idea, and then go through these steps in your head. And so it can go very fast or it can go very slow, just depending on how much time you have and what you're trying to accomplish. And usually, if you know that you haven't spent a lot of time, if you just say, my initial observation is, or my initial thought is, like that, that qualifies the statement and help prepares people for what you're about to say. They're not saying, oh, you're being dogmatic about an issue. Okay, so interpretive summary. The apostles are mentioned. Well, let me see. Let's think about this. I'm assuming that the apostle, the writer is John, the apostle John. So I'm gonna just kind of keep saying the word the again. The apostles' experience concerning the event, or you could say experience. And let's go with experience. Concerning the experience of, and we can pretty much see concerning the word of life that we're talking about Jesus Christ here. I mean, John says, in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God's. The apostles' experience concerning the experience of living with Jesus confirmed that he was indeed human, yet no human uh, is typically called something like word of life. You could say that word is capitalized, so we're dealing with something, someone that is more than human. And when you go into discussion about these verses, you'll find out the different translations, the what, the which, the who. The reason they differ is because they're translating it as, is this focusing on the event, or is it focusing on the person or the experience? And so when it says what was from the beginning, is this the beginning of creation? Is this the beginning of the incarnation when Christ became flesh? Or is this the beginning of the apostolic ministry? In other words, when the apostles were called? Um, I mean, while it does remind you of John 1 and then Genesis 1, it seems to be, because it says what we have heard, what we've seen with our eyes, what we looked at and touched with our own hands concerning the word of life. So this seems to be saying what was, so you might say right here, from these apostles had been with Jesus from the beginning of his earthly ministry. And you remember from the book of Acts that is one of the requirements of an apostle, is that they had been with Jesus since the very beginning, whenever the disciples chose a replacement for Judas. So we could see that going on there. So that's an interpretive summary there. So we're just we went from describing, now we're kind of interpreting. A lot of times here I draw principles, uh, timeless truth principles. What does this say about God? What does this say about man? Um, Perhaps a principle here, I'll use the word principle, is the author is um, beginning his book. Actually, this is not so much a principle as it is a description. But basically, what's happened is the author is beginning his book describing a unique experience that no one else had. Not everyone could claim to be an apostle in the same sense that they were claiming to be apostles. But it's also interesting that it deals with the issue of that they have touched him with their own hands and stuff. Because later on in the book, we're going to see that there were people that were denying that Jesus Christ had come in the flesh. There were people that were denying that he was actually, that they believe he was a spirit being of some form, that kind of like the primitive Gnosticism going on there. But they didn't believe he took on a human. He actually was human in the flesh. And so we have two things going on here. We have the basis for the apostles, and the humanity and perhaps even the divinity of Christ are foreshadowed here, if we're assuming that John 1 is mentioned here. And so let's try this. Let's say the principle, while we're not apostles, sorry, the principle is that witnesses testify to their experience with Jesus. Like I said, this is a unique experience. And so when you're asking about principles, you're asking what is similar and what is different. And I could do spell checking, but that'll take longer. So when we get to application, you could say something like this, is that now there's two types of application. There's primary or secondary. Some people use the word implication for the secondary and the application for the primary. But just to keep it in the three-step method that a lot of people are used to, I'll just go with application this time. So the application would be something like, well, let's deal with the primary audience first. Let's go with that. Primary audience. All right. The readers would see the significance of John's opening that emphasizes his unique apostolic authority. And if people don't know the words that I'm saying, you can pause it, look up a dictionary, things like that. I know we're not in the same places at the same time, but I'm just trying to make a general video about the method. If people have questions about some of the terms I use, they can always message me and get more detail. His unique apostolic significance of John's opening that emphasizes his unique apostolic authority, as well as their experience of the humanity and divinity. I'm assuming that John's verse of Christ, which was being challenged by the primitive Gnostics. The actual view is called Docetism, which comes from the word for appear in Greek. He appeared to be in the flesh, but he wasn't actually in the flesh, they would say, which was being challenged by the primitive Gnostics. Okay, and so John wants, and I know I'm adding to what the rest of the book says, but John wants his Christian readers to remain in fellowship with God and their in them by means of doctrinal fellowship, because it talks about the things that they need to believe, and I'm going to just use the term behavior. Not sure that's the best term, but whenever you're doing these, you're just getting your thoughts on paper. Behavioral fellowship, if that makes sense. Okay, got I mean the doctrinal behavioral fellowship. So from this secondary audience, the church, secondary audience, we can say that we Christians have the responsibility of witnessing to our understanding, and you can even use the word experience, and experience with Jesus Christ that comes through his word. Okay. So we kind of got both ideas, the living word and the written word there. While doing this, we need to emphasize his deity and humanity accordingly. And that's basically the idea that if a person is not struggling with Christ's deity, they need to recognize he's a human. Nowadays, in contrast to these times, the issue is most people don't think that they think he was just a human rather than deity. And so the principle being is that you adjust what you emphasize in your evangelizing or discipleship by what you say. And so, and this should have been a different color. Sorry about that. Okay, that's enough for people to see. Well, let me bring out the color good enough. Okay, so let's say that I don't know how long the video has been going. I don't want to look back because it'll distort the screen. But let's say that you've been told that you need to prepare a Sunday school lesson, and let's say you got a day's notice, and before you go to your commentary to go study what the passage is about and all that stuff, you want to get something at a devotional level to your mind. And so what you do is you go and you write out your verse in a sentence, and then you come here and you write your descriptive summary of what you see. You try to bring in a little bit of interpretation, and remember it's preliminary intentive. And then you go into application. How would the original audience apply it, or how did they apply it, and how should we apply it? And this, when you would, and then what happens is you learn this process. Then when you're talking to somebody, and they let's just do this. Somebody says, "Hey, why does John 1 start out with the question what?" Or it seems like it's a question. It's not a question, but it sounds like one. What? Or some translations may say who or which or whatever. What's it talking about here? And what's he mean by word of life? And so what you could say there is, okay, let me describe to you, or let me give you my observations from this passage. What was from the beginning? Well, that reminds me of John chapter 1. It reminds me of Genesis. What we have heard. Well, who is the we in the passage? The we is John is writing, and John is an apostle. And so we got this idea that the apostles are writing, or John's writing as a representative of the apostles, and he's talking about their experience right there. And he's calling something the word of life. And this reminds us of John 1 and also Jesus Christ being the word. And so from this, what you got to explain right there when you go into your interpretation summary is about the issues with the Gnostics. You would talk about where people doubt the deity of Christ nowadays. Back then, they doubted the humanity of Christ because they had all these concepts about matter being evil, and they couldn't believe certain things, and because they were allowing the philosophy of the world of that age to determine that. And so you kind of get them helping understand that here the apostles are making a special claim of a unique experience with Jesus Christ, who was both God and man. So you're talking about that. And then you say the reason this is so significant. I mean, if you imagine putting yourself in their position, you see that there are false teachers that are attacking the humanity and divinity of Christ. Just as even today, we have people that attack the humanity and divinity of Christ. The divinity more so, as I was saying, you have the Mormons, which believe that God was a man at one time and that man can become God. You have the Jehovah Witnesses, which deny that Jesus is God. You have several different groups about this, and then you have others that say, for example, the Seventh Day Adventists or some of the Seventh Day Adventists believe that Jesus has a sin nature, and that might be an attack on the humanity and things like that. And of course, you have the Muslims who deny the deity of Christ. And so the point is that regardless who you're talking to, if you know that from your discussion with them, of your evangelizing or discipling pre-evangelism, that they don't understand the deity of humanity, you shift your emphasis in your communication at that point. You witness to what a person needs to know. You fill in the gaps with what they need to know. And so that is a long way around. But I mean, you could even narrow it down shortly. You could say, um, say like this. Verse 1 is talking about the apostles having a unique experience and with Jesus Christ, who is both the God man, and because that they are attacking his humanity in this book. John begins in this way to establish authority and to counter that teaching before he goes into a more particular. And in the same way, we must be willing to adjust our witness, not compromise our message, but adjust our witness according to our audience. And so, with that said, hopefully this demonstrated to y'all how just doing these descriptive summaries, interpretive summaries, and application summary can put you in a position where you're getting to understand the text a little bit better, and you're able to share it with others. And that's part of the mission statement, or is the mission statement for the layman's seminary, teaching Christians how to study the Bible and share it with others. If you've been blessed by this video, or you know somebody that will, please continue watching them, subscribe and share. On the next video, I will do one at the paragraph level, continuing with 1 John. God bless.